So we all have three lives that we live, and this kind of goes in opposition to the idea that we should be whole people. But in order to become a congruent whole person where we're living with integrity and all of the aspects of our lives are pointing toward and aligned to the same principles and purpose, it does help to compartmentalize and section them so that you can actually align them. So the three lives that we live fundamentally are our public life, our private life, and then our deep inner life, okay? The deep inner life is the most important of these, and it's the one that we really need to pay attention to because it's the mechanism, the means by which we can align the other aspects of our lives. When we're dealing with the personal mission statement here, this is the life that matters most. It's where the thoughts and intents of our hearts lie, okay? The psalmist wrote, "Search your own heart with all diligence, for out of it flows the issues of life." No one knows the thoughts and intents of your heart but you. Only you can become aware of those deep desires and the deep motivations that you have in your inner life, in your heart, and in your mind. The beauty of being human is that you can not only examine your own deep secret inner life, but you can explore it deeply and objectively and actually change it too because of that ability to explore and contemplate it with our conscience and our imagination. So you can decide whether or not your inner motives, the inner thoughts, the deep secrets, the desires are in line with the outcomes that you want for yourself and your loved ones. You can't do that though without knowing what those outcomes are. But fundamentally, you can decide which desires, intents, and ambitions are the ones that are worth pursuing and are the ones that are worthy of who you are at your core. Enter Gandhi quote here. You could say anything by Gandhi and it would be amazing, but this one's particularly awesome. This really resonates in a way that is super impactful when you're thinking about what it means to live with integrity. Okay, so Gandhi said, "One cannot do wrong in one aspect of life while hoping to do right in another. Life is one indivisible whole." Going back again to Jason's famous quote of how you do anything is how you do everything. That if you seek to do wrong in one aspect of your life, inevitably you are breaking yourself against the principles of wholeness and congruency, and therefore fracturing your soul. This is probably why the idea that J.K. Rowling posed through, the villain Voldemort of Horcrux is actually very powerful, is because the most evil version of who we could become is the type of person who would fracture their soul infinitely in order to live as long as possible, instead of aligning their soul and becoming congruent so that they can best serve and achieve worthy purposes. That quote from Gandhi is incredible. Can't do wrong in one aspect of life and hope to do right in another, because life is one indivisible whole. And in contrast to that, on the flip side of that coin, we cannot do right in one aspect of life and not have it bleed over into every other thing that we do. And so as we try to align and make congruent all the aspects of our life to a worthy purpose, a worthy vision, and align ourselves with the values that will get us there, that are in line with true principles, then that is where we become a whole person and have congruency there. And the personal mission statement really is the encapsulation of that. So in order to best understand the importance of this deep inner life, here's a story for you that's modeled after one of Arthur Gordon's. And parts of this character, as maybe things you've heard me say in the past, I did incorporate some principles and experiences that I personally have had, although they are very disconnected from each other. And so this story is about no one in particular. I thought it would be helpful in guiding us to ask the deep questions. So it models the story Turn of the Tide, but it's more tailored to us. It's designed to be one way to begin with the end and think about the deep inner questions of this deep inner life. This is called Returning Home and Back to Center. So a young guy returned to his hometown for Christmas break. This is a college student who is on Christmas break, goes back home to visit some of his old friends, all right? As he's walking around the halls of his high school, because he had some good relationships with teachers there, he spotted this familiar figure. It was his old track coach, who had helped him become a dominant state champion and who had remained a close friend and mentor, one of those people that you don't see for a long time, but there's this kinship because of the impact that they've had in your life. This coach could tell that something was a little off with this guy. So he asked him, he said, "What's going on?" The young man hesitated, unsure of how to answer, but the coach persisted, and eventually the guy opened up about some of the struggles that he was having. And nothing crazy, but just he expressed that, I've been a little lost, as he admits to the coach, like, I'm not sure where I'm headed or what I'm supposed to be doing in life. And it's not a big deal, but I don't really feel a sense of direction. The coach nods and responds. He says, "I know what that's like. In fact, a lot of my athletes have dealt with that, and I did as well. But let me just ask you this question." This guy was really good at sales, by the way, this coach. coach. He said, "Where were you happiest as a kid?" So the young man thinks for a moment. He's sitting there contemplating, and he responds. He says, "Well, actually, funny enough, where I was happiest as a kid is where we're going tomorrow with my family for Christmas. It's a cabin that we rented for Christmas break that I used to actually go to coincidentally as a kid, and we used to do a bunch of youth events there and stuff. And so we're going back for Christmas break, and it's kind of a cool memory because my family has a lot of memories at this place, and so do I. It's a very fond location for me." So the coach smiles. He says, "Perfect. I want you to take some time to listen to this podcast episode that I made for some of my athletes." Now, this coach is an incredible human being, but he's also a very high level coach for athletes that go from high school to running and doing track at the best universities in the country, and then many of whom make the US and the Olympic team. So he texts this young man a link of a podcast that he did for some of his athletes, the coach, and then he says, "The questions that this podcast poses are going to guide you through this thought-provoking kind of meaningful experience. So make sure that you write down your thoughts and then commit to taking some time to yourself while you're at your cabin, outside, away from everyone. I know it's going to be cold, but listen on the way up, write down the thoughts, write down the questions, and then go out by yourself, read the questions to yourself, and make sure that you do some of the deep work there." And so the young man's a little confused, but he loves the coach, and so he's happy to listen to one of his podcasts. He does as the coach suggests, right? So as he rode up to the cabin with his family, they're passing through the windy roads on the way up the mountain, through the hills, over the woods they go, or whatever, however that goes. He writes down the questions that the podcast poses because he's listening to it on the way. So they arrive at the cabin, and family's very excited. They start unpacking their things, and this young man starts to feel this sense of apprehension, excitement, because the questions are teasing enough for him to be like, "Man, I wonder if this is going to be a meaningful experience. I think it might be." He starts to see that if he takes this coach's advice to heart, he might have some clarity and direction that he'd been laughing at. So the guy throws his bag on the bed, leaves his phone there, takes the piece of paper. One of the instructions was to leave your phone from the podcast. Grabs his notebook with the piece of paper that he wrote the questions on. He heads outside, okay? He finds this quiet spot outside, away from everyone, and sits down. His coach had told him not to look at the questions again until he got outside and was alone. And so he kind of forgot what a couple of the questions were. Now, away from everyone, but a little impatient to get this over with, the young man looks at the instructions he had written on his notebook from the podcast. The first instruction says, "Read one question at a time every couple hours." Sheesh, dude, couple hours? I'm freezing balls out here. So he looks down at the paper, snow blowing onto it, wrinkling slightly in the wind, his breath fog adding texture to the foreground, the words as he reads them. The next instruction reads, "Listen carefully." Listen to what? He wonders. He takes a deep breath as if to sigh, like it's going to be a long night, I guess. The air is cold and crisp, and the snow is crunching under his feet. He figured that he'd give it a shot. He owed it to his coach. So he closes his eyes, breathes deeply again, listens some more. He can smell the pine trees and the snowflakes mix and intertwine with his senses, reminding him of the hot chocolate and skiing trips they used to have. And in that moment of stillness, the racing thoughts in his head begin to slow down. He feels this sense of peace and clarity wash over him, and he starts to almost hear his own heartbeat over the sound of the gentle stream nearby. Now he opens the book again, gathering his senses, writes down some thoughts on a different page, and then turns back the page to the next set of instructions. All right, I think this might be cool. Interesting, at least, he thinks. So he scans down the page to the next line. The next instruction reads, "Try reaching back." So he thinks back to his childhood. I guess that's what that means. The days where he was so carefree and happy. He remembers playing tag with his friends, which turned into capture the flag as they got older, which then evolved into some extreme version of paintball and inflicting pain on each other. He starts to reminisce about the summer lake swims, the winter polar plunge, sneaking off at night, joking, laughing, rescuing each other from the moose that one time they almost died. Oh, and the one time they almost got struck by lightning. Crazy. That was wild, man. So he takes some time to write down his thoughts, his memories, and starts to feel this sense of joy and gratitude. He realizes how much he has to be thankful for, how many happy moments he had experienced in his life up to this point. It was this mix of gratitude and happiness with also a bit of sadness and regret too, knowing that he hadn't been as carefree as that lately, not as driven and determined or able to let loose and be himself. That probably made a big difference in his performance in track compared to now. No wonder he wasn't playing ball anymore, football. The memories start to bleed back in, distracting him again. He wanted more of that. He began to muster up some resolve to focus on those moments more, to cherish them, to hold them close, to try to live a life that created new memories like that, ones that were even more meaningful maybe. As he holds the piece of paper again to his hand, he starts to realize that the sun has gone down and it's harder to see. It's nighttime now. He almost forgot how cold it was. And though he wasn't too far from the cabin, not far enough to be worried about wolves or coyotes, he can see the house lights. But the moon was out as well. And coupled with the white snow, everything looks oddly bright. It's like dark yet bright. So he looks down and he reads third question. Scans down the paper. It says, re-examine your motives. My motives? He hesitates at first, unsure of what to think, but when he sits down and starts scribbling some of his goals and aspirations, jotting them down a bit, kind of frantically, his minor accomplishments, he begins to become, he starts to get sad again as he realizes that so many of the things he was doing right now are driven by external factors like money, status, recognition, things that just didn't actually matter in the grand scheme of things and would not have made him happy. Outwardly, everyone would have thought he was selfless and service-oriented, but he actually wasn't. At the root of every ambition, he could identify some selfish motive, and where there wasn't a selfish motive, he could at least sense a diminished ambition. He could plainly see some form of apathy that he had used as an excuse to not rise up over the challenges and setbacks that he had had in his life. The forks in the road that over the last several years had put a halt on the things that he thought what he wanted to do in life. And as he reminisced about his younger self only a few years ago, how he had been driven by the desire to win at everything, literally everything, and be the best. It wasn't like some domination sort of thing, although sometimes it was a little much. He just couldn't stand not giving everything he had in every aspect, always. So he's sitting here wanting to find this sense of purpose again and to somehow align the internal stuff, that fire, with the external stuff, the achievements, the things, the pursuits. It's easy to dream though, right? So then he thinks back to his time as a state champion track athlete, driven by that same veracity that he was longing to have again in that moment, that tenacity, that ferocious. He was an absolute animal in track and in every sport he played, really. Top point scorer in the state. Out of nowhere, he mouthed it mockingly as he made a funny face, the image of a former coach that used to coach him in football, who had left the school to coach track for another team in between seasons. He could see his lips moving, the movie playing in his head of this coach. Dude had no idea how much work I put in, crushed his guys, all of them, skipping lunch every day, pulling 2-a-days lifting. I loved the fact that nobody worked harder than me, and I still beat everyone in practice. Their first workout of the day, geez, mine, that was my second, sometimes third. Where's that now, though? Where's the skipping lunch mentality now to work out again? You barely even take enough classes to have homework so you can work and make money. And you definitely don't fill that time with more work, so what? His sadness starts to turn to anger. Who cares? Then to apathy. As all the thoughts come in, he stops writing and realizes something. At first, the reminiscing, the longing back to the days of domination had brought a sense of joy, of hope maybe. He'd felt that gratitude start to flood in, but then quickly it became mixed with this sadness and regret. Even though he had realized how much he had to be thankful for and how many happy moments he had experienced in his life, he also allowed himself to finally feel how he had let his ambitions slip, how he was not the same anymore, too careful, not daring enough, too perfectionistic, too hard and brash, rigid. He longed for that sense of drive again and that feeling of being unstoppable, that kind of hardcore that makes it really cool when you choose to be compassionate and kind. Because you know you're the one choosing it. It's not the default rollover mechanism. So he pulls out the paper again, ready to be done with this whole experiment. I'm only out here because I promise you, bro, as if he was talking to the coach, head down, ruffling the paper, opening it again as if the coach were there with him and he was trying to ignore him. Bro, like, I'm only doing this because I promise you, bro. Head down, ruffling the paper, opening it again as if he were talking to his coach. Like now they were on the same page or level or something, using the word bro. This guy, a head coach of future Olympic athletes? What? He's just a high school coach. I may not be playing college ball like I thought. Nobody was there. Yeah, thanks for making me freeze my tail off. His dad said that a lot, but he'd never say it in public. Not the dad, the young man. Something about being too cool for it, like father, like son. His weight shifts, his eyes focus as the snow crunches under his feet again, skipping him out of this trance he was in. The last question came into view as he looked at the bottom of the page, and it registers in his mind. Write your worries, your regrets, the things you hate, to be rid of and let them go. That syntax, the grammar, that doesn't even make sense as he's reading his own handwriting. You freaking wrote it, bro. Chill out. I mean, I am chill. It's freezing, but whatever. Talking to himself. As he walks over to the nearby snowbank where he intends to write his worries, his regrets, his feelings in the snow, he flips over the pen to carve words with the back of it into the snowbank, bends down to write, and he thinks, so when do I change then? When do I actually make the choice to get back to me, to what I know I can be, who I know I actually am? He clears and carves out a space in the snow. He carves out a few words with the back of his pen, incoherent scratching, most of his worries, his doubts, his regrets, who he was that he hated, he wanted gone, frozen, imprinted, ready to melt away. He wants this guy to be gone forever. Shoot, he realizes something. No way I want my brothers seeing this in the morning. Imagine them coming out, looking at all of this stupid stuff I just wrote in the snow, even though I'm trying to get rid of it. How do I get rid of this guy? The version of him, all of his wants, all of his vain ambitions, worries, regrets, right there, written in the snow somehow. That's the guy he was trying to get rid of, okay? Realizing that the snow probably wouldn't melt tomorrow and his brothers would probably love to play down in that spot. Geez, I gotta get rid of this guy. The words echo in his mind again. What guy? That guy he didn't like. The guy he transferred into the snow to forget about. The one he wouldn't want his brothers or dad or high school sweetheart to see, let alone his future, hopefully, wife to experience, like they would see in the snow tomorrow. So he stands up, zips. Good riddance, bro. Freaking pissing you away, literally. Bye. No more of this crap. Time to get back to me, to center, and to start winning for real again. A more satisfying relief than normal, as this time he could now see the steam kind of abruptly rise. Have you ever had that happen? And vanish as the yellow tinted liquid and melted away the words he never wanted to see again. That guy he never wanted to associate with again. Yep, there it was. Without being fully conscious of it, he felt it. The weight off his shoulders. In that moment, it was a sense of release and freedom. He realized that he could change. He could shed his apathy, even the fragile motives and ambitions that haunted him, and that the new ones he could choose were going to be much, much stronger. They already were. The old ones could melt away just as crudely, like in the snow, being pissed away, and he resolved to focus on the things that truly mattered in life, and to live with purpose and intention, to win again, to get fired up again, to settle for nothing less than all-out effort every day, outwork everyone again, and to take pride in relentlessly pursuing excellence again.